Hi everyone, how's it going? Welcome to the channel, and I am here for a discussion video for you guys. And for this discussion video, I want to talk about music changes or music taste changes and opinion changes in general when it comes to music. Now, I feel like some people might not think that there's really any point in making a discussion video like this, since this is something that happens to people all the time, in the world of music. Sometimes, people change their favorite bands every now and then. This is something that I have personally seen with people, and some people just happen to prefer, one thing over another, as time kind of goes on. But I figured that, it would be important for me to talk about this from my point of view. And the reason I say that is because I don't think anyone has had many musical changes within the rock and metal spectrum as much as I have. And the reason I think this way is because from what I've noticed, there's a lot of people that, they just stick to, whatever they're familiar with, whatever they're most familiar with. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with listening to music that you're mostly familiar with and whatnot. But it seems like a lot of people really are afraid to branch out, I guess, and try out different subgenres of metal and rock and whatnot. And I think it's pretty obvious that I am a bit all over the place in the world of rock and metal, and I think that could be seen as a good thing because diversity is a plus. I like metalcore, new metal, progressive metal, some thrash metal. I don't like a lot of it, but I do like some of it though. And just so much more. Classic rock, new wave of British heavy metal. I mean, there's a lot that I really like in the world of rock and metal, of course. But yeah, this is all stuff to take in consideration as well, because I've definitely been all over the place, and it seems like a lot of people are really only willing to stick with one style. Not gonna lie, that is a little frustrating to think about, but it is what it is, of course. And the reason that I am into so many different styles of rock and heavy metal is because of these, changes or phases. I'm going to use phase kind of loosely because, well, I wouldn't really consider anything that I'm into now, or anything that I was into, even then, necessarily a phase, maybe other than a few bands, such as my Melodeath phase, of course. But I feel like that's one of the things that I really need to talk about, because I feel like the reason that I feel like it rather is important to discuss musical taste changes and musical opinion changes is because, well, this is something that has happened with me, is you sometimes will get flack for it. You will get, some negative comments regarding, your taste changing, or you prefer something else over something that you were into for a while. This has happened with me because I'm not a fan. Well, I wouldn't say I'm not a fan, because I still do like some of it, but I'm just not as heavily into Melodeath like I used to back in 2017. And this end result has caused a lot of people to walk away from the channel, and either walk away from the channel or just not comment as much in general. You know what I mean? Now, obviously, people can make their own decisions. They can do what they want, of course, but I just feel like that's one of the things I notice whenever you go through a change like that. It causes some people to become less interested in your content, especially, when you're a YouTuber who talks about music. I mean, that's something that's going to happen, Of course, you're going to upset some people with some musical changes and whatnot. But one of the things that I feel like a lot of these people in particular need to realize is that's not my first time going through, a musical change. Not putting Melodeath as my number one favorite genre of metal anymore. There was a time where I only listened to modern hard rock, 2000s rock, whatever you want to call it. There was a time where I only listened to that style of music, and back in the day, that was before I even had a YouTube channel. So a lot of you guys, were not there to see the change for that. So I feel like that's why a lot of people assume that, my change, from liking, metal that is more on the heavier side to metal that, is a little more not as heavy, a little more melodic is, a bad change. Like they thought it was like the first change that I've ever had in my musical journey, which they'd sadly be mistaken. Let me tell you something. There was a time where Coldplay slipped their way into my musical journey. I know, of all the bands, right? So, and I feel like a lot of people might not know that because this is all stuff that's happened even way before I had a YouTube channel, way before I even uploaded videos to YouTube. And it just doesn't go for, YouTube as well. It can go for, just in general, Sometimes, some people might have this thought, when it comes to taste changes and not preferring one thing over another. Now, like I said, Melodeath was a subgenre that I was really heavily in like 3 years ago, and now I still do like some of it, of course. I like the band In Flames, of course, but I'm just not as heavily into it like I used to, you know what I mean? Like, and some people kind of gave me a little bit of flack for that, for not, putting it in the top 3 best subgenres of metal, or, my favorite subgenre of metal like I used to. But, I don't know, I've said this before, and I'll say it again, this is no reason to be mad at someone. And the reason that, I feel like it's okay to have, some musical changes is because you just have to realize, what is really for you. I can think of an example. There was a time where I was not into 70s or 80s rock or metal whatsoever, and look where I'm at now. I'm a fan of several bands that formed in the 70s and the 1980s. So anything is possible, of course. So that was a change that, happened within my musical journey. If I were to go back in time and tell my younger self, and say that, hey, at this time, you're going to get into, bands like Metallica and Iron Maiden, and at this time, you're going to get into bands like Rush and Led Zeppelin, I would sit there like, what? No, there's no way. So it kind of blows my mind when some people think that there's no way that, they can get into certain styles, especially, when it comes to older styles of rock and metal. And I feel like that's a flaw that a lot of this generation has. Again, like I said in my mindset video, in my musical growth video, it is about the mindset that you do go into with some bands. And again, like I did say in that video as well, one of the things that I do look for in bands these days is stuff that I wouldn't have been able to get into back in my youth, pretty much. I think that would be a good way to sum up what I'm really looking for these days, and there's some people that I know that only want to stick with what they were into, back in the day, of course. Now, that's fine to, still explore bands in these genres that you've been a fan of for a while, but you should definitely expand upon that and check out more, of course. And the thing is with musical changes too, and music tastes, it's not necessarily that, you completely walked away from a certain style of rock and metal. And again, like I told this one metal elitist individual that gave me some crap for, not praising Melodeath like I did back in 2017. It's not that, I hate the genre anymore. Like, it's not like I just don't care about it completely. Because again, I like the band In Flames. So it's not like I'm completely dismissive of the subgenre. Now, sure, I'm not, that big of a fan of it like I used to. And even when I was into it, it was only with a few bands. Still put it at the top because at the time, a lot of my favorite bands were in that subgenre. But you get the point. It's not that, I just, once loved it and now hate it or whatever. It's something that it just kind of grew off of me. And I feel like one of the other things that a lot of people need to keep in mind with musical tastes and opinion changes and whatnot is, I think it also has to do with the resonation thing. Like, for example, I personally don't know how I put Melodeath at the top whenever it was just a few years ago. And the reason I say that is because I just don't think I could resonate with that kind of music in the year 2020. And, I just don't see how, like, that style of music fits, where I'm at today. I think, again, it has to do with that resonation thing. Like, you just don't have those same feelings that you would have had, back in the day, you know? Like, maybe again, it might be just a phase thing or whatever. But I understand that, not everything is going to be for everyone. If Melodeath is for you, that's perfectly fine by me. But it's not something that I would personally put in the top 3 of the metal subgenres, like I used to, of course. And also, it may be a resonation thing, and it also might be just, a getting sick and tired of kind of thing. Maybe the reason that some people have, changed their opinions regarding certain bands as maybe their favorites, is maybe because they're kind of sick of those bands. They just consume those bands day in and day out, and they just are just kind of sick of their music. Like, they've oversaturated themselves with that band's music. I personally feel this way with bands like Breaking Benjamin and Red and even Demon Hunter. Now, a part of that does have to do with me being a fan of those bands for a while. I've been a fan of those bands for years, of course, but those are some bands that come to mind when I think of bands that I still do like. I'm still a fan of those bands I just mentioned, but I won't deny that, I am a bit tired of their music. And again, it's because I've listened to them for years. It doesn't have anything to do with me, like dissing on them or not liking them completely anymore or whatever. My attitude with that, with these bands is kind of like, this is nice. I think this is a really good style of music. I enjoy this style of music, but I just need something a little different. I need something that doesn't sound like what I already listen to. And in result, that did cause me to be a fan of different styles of rock and metal from all eras, except for the 2010s, of course. Not including the smaller bands, of course, because I do like some smaller bands that did form in the 2010s. But in my opinion, the 2010s is not a good time for rock and metal, to be quite honest. But that's kind of my take on it, honestly. And I feel like another thing that does play a factor is not necessarily has to do with people walking away from your life or your channel or whatever, or, finding less things in common. Now, finding less things in common is something that can, damage communication, with some individuals, because you just don't find anything in common with them anymore, and this is something that I definitely have been through with people on YouTube and people even in real life as well, in person. You just, find different styles and subgenres of rock and metal that you like more, that you just nowadays don't find anything in common with, some people that you may have been friends with or whatever, or are friends with. Now, this isn't everything, of course, but another thing that does play a factor with this is constantly getting, corrected or questioned about, your musical opinions. This is something that has happened with me several times. There's this one individual who does follow my channel occasionally. He only comments occasionally. He is someone that does constantly, say, well, back then you said this, but now it's this, or, but you said this. What happened to that opinion or whatever? That's something that can definitely get annoying as well. Like, because people have to understand that, tastes change and opinions change. Now, sure, I would say that my opinions change more than most metalheads do, but look at the result in general. This caused me to be a fan of different styles of rock and heavy metal, Again, and it has to do with that thing where some people mostly stick with, what they're already familiar with, and it's something that, changes a lot, not just with music either. I change my opinions a lot with some things, especially, back in the day. But it's something to keep in mind, of course, I think, musical opinions and the changes are okay, as long as you're happy with them, I think. But, yeah. Nowadays, I'm into so many different subgenres and styles of rock and metal and I'm pretty satisfied with it for the most part, you know? And also, don't be afraid to, expand upon, rock and metal if you already listen to it, of course, because you don't know what you're missing out on. Try to explore a band that doesn't sound like something that you would have been into maybe 7 years ago or something. I don't know. That's something to keep in mind, though. But either way, let me know what you guys think. Do you guys agree what all I had to say in this video? Let me know what you guys think. Is there any music changes that you can think of that came to mind? Now, like I said, the opinion changes I have are not necessarily due to the fact I don't like certain bands anymore, because most of the bands that I have gotten into, I still do like today. Some to a lesser extent, but some to a higher extent, of course. And some bands I kind of do find regretful, of course, like Dead by April and Coldplay even. Now, Coldplay, I think they're a really good band if you like indie rock, but I would say only stick with those first 4 albums. But I know I'm going on a tangent here, but yeah, we all have phases and phase bands, regret bands, and bands we just kind of question how the crap did I get into them, But either way, let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day and take care.